All right, so this morning we've got the privilege and opportunity to talk to a dear old friend of mine, Christopher Laundy. Great to have you with us.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So, just so the listeners have an idea of who you are and what you do, I'll just lay the scene. You've got 2 degrees, Chris. You've got a wife, 4 children. You run a full-time private practice as a clinical psychologist. You employ several psychologists underneath you who work for you. You've got graduated psychologists who you supervise. You've written and published your own novel. You're working on your second novel. You give talks at youth groups. You volunteer at your church. You help with the editing, production, and acting in your wife's various drama productions. And somehow, despite all of that, you keep fit and stay sane. That's a lot of plates to be spinning. Tell us how you do it, and also I'd be curious to hear what practices you've developed that people could perhaps themselves also implement.
Yeah, no, great question. So, I guess the best place to start would be to start broad strokes. Is that I have a deep sense that time is the most precious thing we have. Um, you know, you can make more money, you can get more stuff, but time is the one thing that you can't get more of. And so it's the one thing I kind of have this, like, I just see wasting time as like a mortal sin, and so I hate wasting time. So that's kind of the first thing. And there's been a few things that have helped me kind of really develop that sense of the preciousness of time. There was a YouTube clip I watched years ago, and it was called something like "The Battle for Our Time." And it was this young bloke. It was a 10-minute clip. It was a TED talk, and he was talking about, you know, we've got X amount of months in our lives, and he said, like, oh, a third of that bang is gone for sleep, and then X amount is done for, jobs, and Y amount is done for driving, and he kind of went through all the various things, and there was this very small handful of months, or seemingly small handful of months, remaining in your life for free time to do stuff. And then he was like, oh, look, this is how much the average, teenager is spending on social media. And it was an obscene amount. And so that really stood out to me. And I've never really been a big social media addict, but I've definitely wasted time. And so things like that along the way, and having 4 kids means that free time is greatly limited. And so time is precious. And so that's
Yeah.
something that really drives me.
With that, so I've heard you speak previously about the Big Five theory, and one of those traits is being high in conscientiousness. And it would probably be safe to say that, because you are high in conscientiousness, that tilts you towards appreciating the value of time perhaps more than someone who's low in conscientiousness. And I guess one question that comes to mind is, if someone is low in conscientiousness and thus maybe less intuitively feeling the preciousness of time, is there some way that they could, I guess, because I think it is a good outlook to see time as precious as it is. I've shared with you the quote I love by St. Augustine of Hippo that says, every grain of sand in the glass of time is precious to me. Great quote. How could you learn to have that view if you're perhaps not as, because you're very, very high in conscientiousness, as your life kind of suggests. Someone who's low in conscientiousness, can they still have that outlook that's so helpful?
Yeah, no, definitely. And so it's less about being productive. Like, I guess I am a productive person. That's my loading onto my inherent conscientiousness. But for me, it's more about my values. And I think I'm deeply in tune with my values, and I believe that everyone should. And that I'm allocating time on the things that I value. And so for me, there's family, there's my faith, there's work, there's big building blocks there. But I guess a lot of my productivity is spent being creative. And so creativity is something that I greatly value. And so when it comes to, should I watch the telly, which is something that I enjoy, versus should I do some of my writing, which is enjoyable but effortful, I go, oh, well, I could watch telly and I would enjoy that. But if I were to do some writing, that would be more satisfying because it's connected with a deep value of mine. So in terms of your question of, if you're low conscientiousness, it's less about, oh, you should be busy doing stuff. It's more about like, well, what do you want? What do you really value? And so deep down, what is the thing that's going to satisfy you when you're doing it? And that when you're 80 years old, dying on your deathbed, you can look back and go, oh, I spent my time well. And maybe it's being creative, and maybe it's doing plays and all the ridiculous stuff that I get up to. But maybe it's a quiet life of, I was super attentive with my kids. Maybe it's, I spent lots of time, lying on a beach contemplating the mysteries of the universe. But that's the thing. It would be getting in touch with your values.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought about correlating those principles before, that your hierarchy of values is, like, I know that that's important to have really established, but that as a being, I guess, a preconditional building block to the productive use of your time, or not even productive, as you said, just maybe better instead of using the word productive, the meaningful use of your time, because that's, you're not being productive when you're spending time with your kids, but it's certainly meaningful. It's better than productive. So that's a really good point. How can I make the most meaningful use of my time? Well, I can't unless I know what's most important. I love the quote that hitting the target 100% of the time, you're still missing if you're hitting the wrong target.
Yeah. So if you aim at nothing, what's the other variant of that is, if you aim at nothing, you always hit it. and so that's true. So I think for me, in terms of being productive, it's like, yes, what do I value? And I place a primacy on that, and I put emphasis on that. And I kind of declared war on things that I did not value. Because if you don't know what you value, if you don't know that hierarchy and what's meaningful to you, life will swoop in and just gobble up your time. There's an absolute war on our time and attention. Like if you jump on your phone, there is a bajillion apps. There's all the social media. There's other people wanting things from you, and so unless you know what you're doing, unless you're at the helm steering the ship, the prevailing winds will just swoop in and push you in any which way direction, and that's you spending obscene amounts of time doing things maybe that neither that you value nor that you even enjoy. So being in touch with your values, and so I'm familiar with this because I deal within psychology, but would listeners at home know how to get in touch with their values at all?
Yeah, well, I guess what would be 101 step to, I guess, is what might be meant by a hierarchy of values, and how do you establish them?
Yeah. Oh, I guess in terms of hierarchy, like pinning where they live, that could be a tricky thing. But for starters, there's a few activities you can do. One's you're on your deathbed, and you've got 5 minutes to contemplate how you spent your life, and how do you want to have spent it, and that can kind of bring values to the fore.
Before you go into the next, just because I think that's a great point. I was reading an essay just the other day by Carl Jung, and he's talking about death anxiety, and he said that he noted with many of his clients who he'd walked through the last stages of life with, he noted that those who were most at peace about their life coming to a closure was those who had minimal life regret, minimal life regrets, and the major things that they'd hoped to accomplish, they had done. They hadn't left some significant stones unturned that they'd wanted to do. If they'd wanted to do X, Y, Z, and then done all those things, and they'd lived life to the full, then that, he said, almost it severely mitigated the anxiety that's understandably present at death. And I was like, that's a great point.
Yeah, I definitely see that with my clients who have death anxiety. Like, they're terrified of dying, and we'll go on and often talk about that, but often bring it back to okay, so you're terrified of death, but what's wrong with your life right now? And almost invariably they've got these crazy regrets. They're pouring time into things that they don't value. Maybe they've got these hopes and dreams and ambitions that they're too scared to pursue. Like there's something fatally wrong with their life, and they're deeply dissatisfied, and that makes them terrified of dying. Because imagine dying with all that regret. And so if we deal with, like you said, and Carl Jung probably articulated beautifully, is if you live your life meaningfully and in accordance with your values, then death anxiety really recedes because
Yeah.
you can die at peace because I lived my life well. And so death anxiety isn't like oh, I want to be immortal. It's not really that, not really underneath.
Yeah.
It's more about dying, not being fulfilled,
Yeah.
and having regret. Go on.
Yeah. Henry David Thoreau, I think, speaks so eloquently about that. He's got the great line when he says that the mass of men lead lives of silent desperation, which is just so good. And then he's kind of says, because he's wanting to obviously not participate in that trajectory. And so he says, that he wants to suck the marrow out of life and not, when he came to die, discover that he had not yet lived. I was like, oh.
So good. Yeah, so good. Yeah, I love that quote as well. And it's right on target with what we're talking about here of like, time is precious. It's a finite resource. There's things that we value. There's things that we don't. And sucking the marrow out of life is a good way of saying, live in accordance with your values. Spend your time doing that at the detriment of your happiness and death anxiety.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got don't leave things undone that you'll regret. What's another practical point for good use of time?
Yeah, I guess it's probably another variant on the values thing, but I guess I often sacrifice pleasure for satisfaction. And
What's
so
the difference?
I forget who the philosopher was, but he differentiated between high pleasure and low pleasure. And so high pleasures involve effortful effort, either physically or intellectually, and low pleasures are things that easily satisfy our carnal desires. And so I value the high pleasures, and I don't really value the low pleasures. And so even though the low pleasures are things like, eating, watching telly, sitting on a beach and soaking it all up, they're not inherently bad things. For me, the high pleasures are more satisfying. And so in terms of the difference, I guess it's the difference between engaging in activities that are easy dopamine versus hard dopamine. And so easy dopamine is sitting on the couch and eating donut, scrolling on TikTok. It might be very pleasurable. You might enjoy the heck out of it. But hard dopamine is doing that run, lifting the weights, challenging your intellect, reading a difficult book, things like that.
And okay, that's great. And I find the discussion of the dopamine fascinating. The easy dopamine hit, couch, TikTok, donuts, contrast the hard dopamine hit, completion of a novel, degree, going for a run. Does the dopamine last longer for the harder it is to get? Is there any effect on the longevity of the dopamine?
Oh, that's a really good question. I believe so. So there's things like cold showers, for example. You have a cold shower and it's intense and it's effortful, and then you step out of the shower and you get a sustained release of dopamine over the next 2 hours. And so we have this
TikTok
kind of...
doesn't give you that.
TikTok does not give you that. And so that's right, because it's easy and effortless and cheap. You do get a spike, and it's quite potent, the spike, but it's momentary. And so I believe, I think that is correct, that the more effortful the task, the more sustained the dopamine. And that's definitely true, because now that I think about it, it's like when you achieve something very significant, whether that's, I did that, degree or written the book or whatever it is that you're really proud of, you can relish that for decades. And that can motivate you and drive you to propel you for the next mountain to climb, far more than, I had a Tim Tam yesterday.
Exactly, yeah. And I think you've touched upon a relevant correlation between meaning and motivation. And I think if you can set your goals on a distant, lofty horizon of, well, I want to, have my own clinical practice, and I would like to be able to be a successful psychologist. And if that's your goal, then correct me if I'm wrong, but if that's your goal, then every observed incremental progress towards that goal will be an occasion to release dopamine, to incentivize you towards that goal. That's going to be going, hey Chris, you've just got first class honors. Hey Chris, you've just got a 95 for this essay. Hey Chris, you're halfway through your masters, and each time you're going to be getting a dopamine release as you feeling like you are observing, progressing towards that goal. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's 100% right. So if we can, create, envision our future selves, cast a vision, which is that lofty goal.
Yes.
Every little step towards that isn't just a release of dopamine, but it's also a positive, it's also a reliable source of positive emotion. We get a little burst. And so that's the satisfaction, I guess, that I'm talking about. I think you're spot on there. So, if I write X amount of words, it was hard work, but it's minuscule in terms of the end product of writing a book. But it's super satisfying. And it gives me a boost. And yeah, I've forgotten the question, but yes.
Yeah, that's and I guess then the flip side of that, because it's handy that we've got these dopaminergic kind of motivational structures inbuilt into our neurology that helps facilitate motivation over long periods of time. But I guess the peril of not taking that into account is that if you don't have a goal, let's say getting to the position of being a clinical psychologist or some equivalent lofty aspiration, the lack of a goal, would it be fair to say that the lack of a goal minimizes, or no, it makes it impossible you can't make progress towards a non-existent goal? And so if the goal is a precondition for progress marker observation, then no goal, no progress, no sense of meaning, purpose, or dopamine. Would that be?
Yeah, 100%. So I see this with clients. I guess broad strokes, two different clients. So there's the depressed clients, and there's the clients who come in and they feel lost. And so with depression, the mood is super low, and that's probably what people readily recognize with depression, that they feel miserable. But more than that, their depression, their motivation is zilch. For many people, they can't get out of bed. And so the treatment for depression, the gold standard frontline treatment for depression is we set these tiny little goals. And, it can be minuscule. It can be just get out of bed and, go on your phone while sitting up. It can be as tiny as that. And it can be, once you do that, then go and make a coffee. And then, depending on where they're at, maybe they go to the letterbox and back. And then, after that, maybe they get their joggers on and they do a walk around the block. And we set these tiny micro goals towards, it'd be nice to walk 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day. And so the goal is exercise. It's not necessarily a deep value of theirs, but just the act of setting a goal and moving towards it boosts dopamine, which is lacking in depression. And the more they move, the more the dopamine flows, and the motivation and their activity follows suit. And so you do a bit more, the dopamine rises a bit. You do a bit more, the dopamine rises a bit, and the ball starts rolling. And so I see that definitely with depression. And in terms of the clients they're feeling lost, so that's clients who, for one reason or another, like they've got these goals in life and they get taken out. It's the student who has worked tirelessly for however many years to get into medicine. It's their whole life's dream. And then something happens where, bang, they don't get in, or they get a criminal record or something, and that their entire future's done. And so they had this great value, they're in touch with their value and had deep meaning, but bang, it's gone, it's lost. And so they're lost, and they don't know the direction that they're heading in. And so it's difficult with that, because we need to connect them with meaning and purpose. I guess purpose has like a purpose is like an abstract goal that we forever work towards, and it's a forever receding, horizon. Because a purpose would be, deeper than just, I want to run a marathon or set up a business or get married. They're kind of goals, but purpose is sort of deeper. It taps into meaning and values and the like.
Yeah. And with that, like the question that's coming to my mind when you were sharing the person who, say, was striving towards being a doctor, something cataclysmic occurs, that's now impossible. The question that was kind of arising in my mind is, well, what do you do to make sure that you don't find yourself in that situation, and life's unpredictable, and it's fine to maybe have a goal like becoming a doctor. But there's a great philosopher from kind of the early medieval period named Boethius, and he talks about in the constellation of philosophy the fragility of happiness and meaning and purpose and all that. And I guess one solution that he offers to that problem of, well, what if my goal or the thing that I live for is taken from me? I'm left in an existential crisis more or less now. His solution to that, which I think is quite good, is try and have not to the exclusion of the material goals, but in addition, have a goal or a thing that you live for, that you derive a sense of meaning from, that can't be taken from you. And obviously your profession, most things can be taken from you, but there are some things that can't be taken from you, and that gives you, in the opinion of Boethius, a stable anchor that reduces anxiety. Because if, say for instance, your life is aimed towards just making other people's life better, and that's your goal, then it doesn't really matter what happens. You can still want to pursue that end.
No, you're 100% right, and that's right. Yeah, that's why like purpose is like something deeper than goals, because goals can be taken out, you can fail, whatever. But yeah, having those transcendent kind of goals, being a good person, pursuing holiness, getting to heaven. There's these things that cannot be taken from you. And you made me think of this great scene in Lord of the Rings. It's in the book, and it's in the extended edition of the Lord of the Rings. It's in the section where Frodo and Sam are plodding along through Mordor, and things are grim. Frodo's super depressed. Sam's pushing him along, and they're sitting down, I think, having a breather, when they look up at the sky, and I think there's this prevailing wind that, I think it's Aragorn sailing down the ships. There's something like that going on elsewhere, but it parts the thick veil that's covering the sky for a second, and these stars emerge. And Sam has, this great line that I forget, but it reminds him that there's beauty that cannot be touched. And it doesn't matter how bad things get here, there's always, goodness, truth, and beauty, out there that is unsullied, that can't be tainted. And so even though Mr. Frodo and I might die, even though we might fail, even though this world may end, there's always something good out there, and that provides him transcendent hope and and the fortitude to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it might be a different point in the narrative, but it reminds me of Frodo's having this existential crisis where it's like, why are we even doing this? Like, what's the point? And Sam has that great line, because there's some good in the world and it's worth fighting for.
Yeah. Two Towers. At least in the movie, it's in the Two Towers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, well, you can't take that away from Sam. The conviction that there is some good in the world and it's worth fighting for, because you could, burn down the Shire, you could, fail at all this, but that orientation towards the world is retained, and that gives him a sense of purpose, despite the fact that he thinks he's probably going to die, and his world's crumbling around him, but he has purpose to rise above the limitations that he's confronted by because of that purpose that he feels.
Oh man, I love Lord of the Rings. It's so good.
Now, we've been speaking a lot about time. I've actually run out of time, so it's probably a good point to stop there. But thank you so much for your time. It's just great to hear your insights, and I think that a lot of people can benefit from hearing them.
Not at all. Thanks, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure.